Our ancestors charted the course. Road upon road of precise measure. Bridges, tunnels, superhighways, and cul-de-sacs. But these roads are so much more than gravel, concrete, dirt, and asphalt. Our road becomes the unacknowledged witness to the gritty moments in our wanderings on this earth. The crossroad moments, where choice and free will blur the map, and the destination seems to disappear. Our road endures much as we sculpt it, with our bustle to and fro. Potholes form, rocks fall, cars slam through guardrails, delays, detours, death in the family. Highways with no exit ramp in sight, sudden twists and turns without slowing down, or worse yet, someone else behind the wheel, our life in their hands, and we wonder, how did we get here?
Crack cocaine is a very bad addictive drug. It makes you do very evil things that you would not normally do. It takes away your job, your family, your life. It takes everything from you. I made the wrong decisions in 1993 to smoke crack cocaine. I did not know what I did until my house was surrounded by squad cars and I was taken to the Special Crimes Unit and I was being questioned about a murder. Right then and there, I knew it was real bad. It was bad and there's no way getting out of it. When you have 3 officers or detectives in the room with you and each of them asking you questions and they're yelling at you, it was very scary because I was lost. I was angry at myself because that's not who I am. I'm a caring person. I love people. I like bringing joy. I like bringing life to people. That's what I do. But that night, I didn't bring life to people. I didn't bring joy to people. I took a life. And I think about that every single day. I wanted to talk to my mom. I needed her with me. And they allowed that phone call. That was a tough phone call to make, to call my mom on the telephone and tell her that I'm being charged with murder. Her son who she loves so much. She didn't take it well because she kept on saying that you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. Not my son, my son. That was a very hard moment there. When I got locked up, my mom was young and very energetic, full of life. But now she's 73 years old and it's very hard for her to get around. People would think being in a very small, cold room with a toilet, bars, and you always looking over your shoulder, you would think that would be a hard moment. But being away from your family, your loved ones, it's the hardest thing that you have to deal with. That road home was blocked off for me for 20 years.
2 years after I graduated from college, my brother and I elected to start a graphics company that was supplying to the marine and RV industry. And in a very short amount of time, we built a very successful company in that industry. Well, I can remember sitting in our conference room table and my brother leading the board of directors meeting and saying, we just think that with all the differences between our management styles that it's time for you to move on. And my brother said, I'm going to call for a vote. And it was my mother, my brother, and I voting, and it was a 2-to-1 vote. It was like losing a child, because that company was something that I had been a part of in its infancy and had watched it grow up, and then suddenly that environment was yanked from me instantly in a vote. I'd like to say that God's hand immediately just fixed that sense of betrayal and abandonment. But very much it was a road and a journey. It was a process getting over loss, not only the loss of my job and my position, but also really of my family at the time. Moving down into St. Petersburg and starting the company, it was financially just devastating. It was struggling. And then during that process, my first wife walked out and left me with a 7-year-old to have his full custody. So I was starting a business and was single parent with full custody of my son. We could not afford to buy a house. We couldn't even afford to do rent and make payments on an apartment. My son and I, Jordan, were actually living in the back of the plant in my Coachman motorhome. I'd get him up in the morning in the motorhome, I'd make him breakfast, and then I'd take him to school, and then I'd go to work, and my administrative assistant would pick him up, and he would come back to the plant, and he would sit, he had an area outside of my office, and he would do his homework and things, and then we would go back to the motorhome, and that's where I would cook him dinner. It became a mission to survive.
When Rachel would walk into a room, it didn't just light up. It was like 4th of July walking in the room, and that's just the way she was all the time. She carried her light on all the time, and so she was such a bright person and a loving person, and it just shone in everything she did. I'm a third alive compared to her. In other words, her life was just always bright, always happy, always caring about somebody else, and it was contagious to be around. It was magical. She was so in love with Jesus, I am telling you. It was everything. Every day was an adventure for her. That's not normal. It's a gift. Rachel was a gift. On Christmas Eve, I had gone to church with my granddaughter. Afterwards, we got prepared and everything to go to my aunt's house in Cassopolis, where we'd done Christmas Eve for years. We were waiting for Rachel to arrive, and at pretty much precisely 7:30, my wife said to me, "Rachel's not here. Go find your daughter." I immediately got up, and I got in the car, and I left to go find her. As it turned out, I didn't have very far to go. She had almost made it to my aunt's house. Just about 1.5 miles away is where she had her accident. And when I drove down to the accident scene, there were ambulances and fire trucks and, police cars everywhere and the lights. And I drove without abandon right around all of them and right up to the accident. And I realized that it was Rachel's car. It was at that moment that I knew it was bad because the car was really in bad shape. And I asked somebody, is she dead? But before they could even get to me, I fell to the ground. And I knew. I'm not exactly sure how I got there, but I found myself in a police car with a police officer, and he was trying to ask me questions. And they really wouldn't let me talk to anybody because my phone kept ringing. My son-in-law trying to find his wife. In a situation like this, where time sort of freezes, and you'll never see it again the same way, there's an incredible power that comes with that. So as we drove to the hospital, there was a clarity in my mind that I can't explain, in just knowing that God's hand was there the entire time, simultaneously with a pain like I've never experienced before. And we got there, and they put us in a room in the emergency room area. It wasn't very long before they came and told us. As you might imagine, what a 26-year-old man who loved his bride experienced. I had already had my moments of anguish that go beyond words, and I got to witness his. That's something I'll never forget. It was as though a book had been read to me in 1 second. The days following the accident might be, it's easy to say, it's probably the worst time period of my life. I had no idea that something could hurt this bad and have no wound. It's not just your pain you're dealing with, you're witnessing the pain of everyone around you. It's compounded. And you just can't imagine ever being right again.
When I was a kid, I was fishing with my dad, and we had a bait casting reel, and after I cast the lure out to the water, that spool kept spinning, and there was a bird's nest in the spool, and it was just impossible to untangle. And I remember looking at it thinking, I can't fix this. There's no way. And so I just kind of gave it to my father. I said, I can't fix this. And he gave me a new pole with a new reel that wasn't tangled. And when he took my problem, took responsibility for it to fix it, and gave me a new start, it was one of the most memorable moments of my childhood. And I look at people who have desperately broken situations, and I think, how do we get tangled up, confused, broken lives back on the way that leads to real life? How do we get them on the road to get their feet turned in the direction so they can walk the way of Jesus? And I'm so thankful that from the very beginning of this church, we have consistently said we all have tangles and messes in our lives, and we're in this together, and God can fix the most broken, desperately tangled life.
A lady in my church, when I was a kid growing up, said to my mom one Sunday, the church isn't a museum, it's a hospital, because it's a place where the broken get put back together again. And the broken actually matter before they're fixed, before we get back on the road that's toward recovery, toward Jesus. Brokenness matters.
No matter where you're at on your spiritual journey, whether right now you perceive yourself as I'm running towards God or I'm running away from God, no matter what, everybody's road intersects suffering. There is no stop sign erected at the place of your suffering. You know, and we're all going to suffer, but the church is the place where you're invited to suffer, not alone, but in community. One of my first conversations with you, Mark, you said to me, this is going to be a church for people who don't like church.
I knew what church was, so I knew when I was invited exactly what I was going to get, and it totally blew my mind, because in all of those other churches there was a sense that you had to be a certain distance down the road in your spiritual walk, and when I came to Granger, it's like it didn't matter.
I was probably the opposite. Just growing up in a family that was, everything was anti, stay away from those buildings, they're wild, they're crazy, they do weird things there, having no exposure to what church was. And I love that about Granger. It doesn't matter where you started or what you came in knowing. Anyone can come into this building, can come into our campuses and hear about the love of Christ and just pick up right where they are in their own journey.
You haven't lost so much, nor have you become so lost that Jesus can't find you. And because he came to seek and save the lost, our message from day one at GCC has been a message of hope.
Sometimes our road can be ugly and ominous, with sharp curves ahead. But still, the road speaks of progress and searching as we pursue meaning, find connections, crave adventure, or long for home. As we run this course before us, we hope for a safe place to rest. Yet, we long for momentum, crave the freedom and direction, purpose and peace. We pave our own way toward or away from something or someone. The map leading the way appears more and more like a spider's web. Wounded and confused, we struggle. And we ask, where do we go from here?
There's something really important that happened to me at that moment. I knew in a split second that I had a decision to make, a huge choice to make. And the choice was, I either believe that there is a God and that he cares about each one of us and he's in control and he has a purpose and a plan, or there is no God and I'm living in a hellish existence on a chaotic planet where nothing makes sense and it's just one evil experience after another. And I chose in that moment to choose God. The fact that this was Christmas Eve wasn't lost on me. In one sense, it seems the cruelest. And in another sense, it's a constant reminder of Christ entering the world. I won't lie, Christmas is difficult for me now. I live in those moments, but those moments don't represent death to me. They still represent life to me. The relationships that I had my friends from GCC really did come to my rescue. It's extremely important that there's people around you during that time, because there's so many voices inside your head at that point. If you don't have real people speaking to you, it could drive you kind of crazy. I'll go as far as to say that had that connection not happened, I'm not exactly sure how things would have played out for me. The road that I was on before Rachel died was probably altogether typical. I was a businessman trying to succeed. I mean, the things that I was doing were good things, but they were still at their core about me. I would have told you I was an extremely active Christian, been active in the church, served like crazy, been doing that for 30 some odd years. I would have said I'm an engaged Christian, but what I didn't know is Jesus was not at the center of my life. He was an attachment. In the middle of the night, I woke up one night having a profound sense of the hypocrisy of my life. It was a crushing sort of feeling, and I said it out loud. I said, God, now is not the time. My daughter's dead. Do we really have to do this now? And it didn't go away. A couple weeks went by, and it was time to go back to work. At least that's what I thought. So I went back to my office, and I really didn't want to engage with people too much, so I just closed my office door. And I will admit I had no desire to be there. Nothing had any meaning to me anymore. And I said it out loud. What am I supposed to do now? And I got an answer. This was internal. This wasn't external. But he said my name. He said, Gene, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to love me. I want you to love yourself. And I want you to love the next person I put in front of you. And just keep doing that.
The first year and a half of running Falcon Enterprises was a nightmare. From a very financially stable career, I went to just financial devastation. Very, very dark time, but a strengthening for my faith. And it really firmed up the foundation that where I very much enjoyed having nice things, it wasn't what was really important, and it wasn't what would get me through the very, very tough time. As the company grew and got to be successful again, I had an epiphany in my career. It wasn't about me. I realized it was about everybody else. Frankly, I was shocked because for many years of my career, I was under the impression it was really all about me. March of 2000, Christine and I were married, and it was so exciting for me to have my wife actually involved with something that I had such a passion for. And so over the next 5 to 7 years, the company, it was just a thrill. I had my wife there, my son would be there as well, and the company was financially solid. In fact, it had grown to be a major player in the industry, and God's hand had just blessed the company, and Christine and I were faithful, and it was utopia. As part of the sale, I was under contract to still remain traveling to Elkhart and helping the sales force and still developing accounts. And so I still very often am in Elkhart. And that was the catalyst for us starting to go again to the Granger campus. At that time, we were like gypsies. We would be in Island Marada for 2 weeks. We would be in St. Petersburg for 2 weeks. And then maybe we would be in Elkhart for 2 to 4 weeks. We were always on the move. So we needed to stay connected to the church that we were so endeared with. And so we started to go on line on a regular basis. We would key up GCC Wired and sit and watch the service every week.
I very much cannot stay focused, but when I am at Granger, if I have it on the internet or the television, I'm totally captivated. I'm not sitting there making my grocery list or wondering what laundry needs to be done. It captures me and it holds me and it gives me everything I need.
It's just more what I would classify as shoe leather Christianity. It's something you could take to the office the next morning. Not focusing on doctrine, but more on how you're going to lead your life Monday morning. How are you going to impact others?
Most people vacation here and we have the luxury to live here. But I would actually move to be in Indiana where I freeze when it's 70 degrees because of the community that Granger has. I would move to Elkhart, Indiana for Granger Community Church.
I spent the first 8 years in prison, wondering if I would get out of there alive. There is a road inside the prison system too, levels and steps to take. After about 18 years, I was transferred to Westville Correctional Facility, a medium security prison, and then I was transferred to South Bend Work Release. This is a facility that allows you to go out and get a job in the community. On application, you always got to put down, have you ever been convicted of a felon? I applied for over 25 jobs, but no one never called me back. No one wanted to hire a felon. You know, and there's people gonna judge me. People gonna judge me every day because of the fact that I took a life. I couldn't get to church, I was locked up. But Granger Community Church give up their time, their precious time with their family, to come inside to DLC Work Release and minister to all the men inside the prison. So I went to service one night and I'm sitting there looking through the flyer, and on the bottom it says the eatery is now hiring for a cook's position. Since I was little, I would always love to watch my mom cook. Whatever she wanted me to do in the kitchen, I was always there because she called me, I'm gonna come running because it's my mom, I love her. That there is what led me to working in restaurants. Anything you name, I can make it if you put it in front of me or tell me what to make. I will make it, and I guarantee you will like it. I was called to my job coordinator's office and said that I have some good news for you. You have an interview with the eatery at Granger Community Church. And right then and there, I was like, wow, you know, this is something I've been waiting for a very long time. My job coordinator drove me from South Bend Work Release to Granger, Indiana for my interview with Sherry. And she said, well, what were you convicted of, Ackley? I said, I was convicted of murder in 1993. And she said, well, Ackley, we're gonna give you a second chance. We have a very forgiving God. And right then when she told me that it was like a weight off my shoulder because somebody gave me a chance. And if it wasn't for Granger Community Church and the people who love us, who love everyone, no matter what you have done, I wouldn't be here. Because it was the church. No, it was God who gave me that second chance. So when you come to the eatery and you see my name on that board and it says Ackley's Club or Ackley's Soup of the Day, you know I made it and it's gonna be delicious.
Our goal is not to get people into the box. Our goal is to get people who think they have to be in the box out of the box and into the world, being the church in the world. That's what we're about. You don't go to church. You are the church.
Every tool imaginable was used on me to get me to Granger Community Church. It's the church for people like you. I would have never come here. So that particular family was like, we love you. They came to me. And they did. They came and spent time with me and showed me the love of Jesus where I was.
If we don't take the invitation to the Reentry Center, those guys aren't going to show up here to hear the invitation. And if we don't take that journey to the internet, there are places all over the world where it's not going to happen. And if we don't take that journey to a man's life who's grieving and show up in his living room to sit with him, I don't know if he shows up here. I mean, thank God that God didn't wait for us to show up in his part of town. And we're not waiting either. We're going to go meet people where they are.
There's a great passage in Matthew about going into all the world to make disciples. Enter all the different ministry venues that we have enable us to take the gospel and go.
This going is not void of community. When we go to the Reentry Center, there's a community that's happening there that people are coming together as brothers and sisters, whether it's at Monroe Circle Community Center. But there's this community that's being built around that going.
I'm reminded of the night that I went and asked Jesus into my heart, and there was a pastor there because I had questions. And I looked at him and I said, I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to leave my friends. And he said, don't you realize you're the only chance they've got?
When you realize there's real darkness in the world, you don't sit around and wait to be the church. You go out there and you do something about it.
It literally is like a dark room, and every single person's life is like a candle. And we're bringing illumination wherever we are, whether it's our neighborhood or our workplace or the gym or at this campus or the Port or Elkhart or Monroe Circle. We're the light.
It's amazing to have the peace that passes understanding and a deep satisfaction, and at the same time to not be satisfied until everyone knows, until everyone has been redeemed and rescued and recovered and restored and their story makes sense. And there's just a lot of work to do. Now's our time to do it. If we don't act now in faith, trusting Christ, and boldly step into our future will not be what the vision that God has given us says it can be. Everything hinges on our next steps.
On the night Rachel died, I died too. Every time I would go to sleep, I would see the accident scene again. I remember the first bird I heard. The transition from that cold to the spring was, can't be overstated. The first time I heard a bird sing again, everything became huge. I had a dream, and I'm in a swimming pool. I saw somebody else in the pool, and they were splashing and going crazy, and I really couldn't tell who it was until I got closer. And it was Rachel. But she disappeared under the water, and so I dove under the water. And the next thing that I saw is she's in front of me, maybe 5 or 6 feet away, and we're both 5 or 6 feet under the surface of the water. I know because I could look up and I could see the light catching the underside of the water in reflection. And I looked at her. Beautiful blonde hair is all out, and she's looking at me. And I'm so happy. But then I noticed she wasn't smiling. Well, anybody who's known Rachel for 3 minutes knows that she never doesn't smile. She's always smiling. She never stops smiling. And so that bothered me. And just as quickly as the dream began, it was over. But then I said it out loud. God, she wasn't smiling. What is that about? And I knew instantly. In a very real way, I felt like Rachel was scolding me, saying, Dad, it's time. You've been sad for too long. My personality is to joke and to play. That's how I engage people. Without that, I'm not choosing to live, I'm just choosing to exist. And I had no idea how important it was for me to play and to be myself. There's a group of young children in a town called Kalavai in India, and I see hope alive in them. And there's one particular little girl that named Rajaswari, who seems to have taken a liking to me, and her joy and her light is a lot like Rachel's, and I love seeing that in her. Somebody commented the other day that I look truly happy. It was a picture that I have of her and I together, and that I look at each one of those things now as a gift. But there's a beauty in Christ, and there's a beauty in His kingdom, and when we start to look for it, we can see it. The road I'm on now is a road of transformation. Christ wants us to be transformed. He wants us whole. We can participate in that, or we can fight against it. The price for even my transformation, for my heart becoming alive again, was at a great expense. I was not abandoned. If anything, I would say that a barrier that had been in place in my life had been removed. He's real, He's there, He wants you to seek Him. If you pay any attention at all in the Gospels, you saw Him on mountainsides teaching thousands of people. That's essentially the temple. That's essentially GCC. But He also never neglected to pull those guys off by themselves and teach them and disciple them. He was always modeling the behavior that we're supposed to do. So the church means loving the person that's in front of you. It's face to face. That's what excites me, because in the end, you want somebody who's holding your hand when your daughter's dead, not just a text. I certainly believe that together we can do something that we can't do on our own. I know that God's got a plan, and there's something out there to be done. The next step is connecting people to Christ and to connecting people to each other. When people start to love each other and start loving the person in front of them, watch out. You won't be able to contain it.
We're connected with a church that's 1,500 miles away. For Christine and I, GCC Wired has just been a tremendous blessing for us as an outreach program, where we can touch people that are never going to be on the campus.
We have neighbors over, we have friends over, and what's so good about the online service is that it's right there. You can have your friends over, and all you do is put your TV on, and it's so natural.
Even just recently, over the last couple of weeks, friends of ours that for the last 2 years we have tried to get them to go to the GCC campus. They live in Indiana. Well, they were down in Isla Mirada. And one night we put on the special that GCC had done. And again, the room is filled with people. They didn't know it was going to be a service, but it just captured them. And suddenly the same people I could not get for 2 years to go to the campus, they're sitting down and listening to the sermon. Those two significant friends that are significant people in our lives that we have a burden for to reach have now touched GCC by GCC Wire, where we could not get them. Where I think that it's very, very important for Christians to attend a physical church, I also think it's incredibly important to reach out and to reach the world that isn't going to darken the doors. I have had so many opportunities to say, just think about this. You know, both of us are looking at our watches because, especially in today's world, we're so busy and we're so tied up with the things that are pulling at our time. For my friends and things, for them to go, okay, if you died tonight, where would you go? Would you be with me? Most of my friends know I am no good by myself. I have to have my friends. Think about the fact that we could walk for a month. When we're in heaven together, we could walk for a month. And I'm just thrilled about that fact.
Granger is special and it's different and it's weird because it's so big. And you think to yourself, how can a church this big make such a difference?
I come inside the church and I've seen all these wonderful people putting food in boxes to deliver to the local pantries here in Michiana. I was allowed to go to Monroe Circle, which is MC3. I've never seen anything like it in my life. You guys love on people out there. It's awesome. You're doing stuff that should have been done a long time ago. So I took the box to one of the doors and I knocked on the door and it was my 93-year-old Uncle Frank. I hadn't seen Uncle Frank in 20 years. When he opened the door, he was like all drained and like slumped over. And then when he heard my voice and I said, Uncle Frank, it's me, it's Ackley. It's like he stood straight up and he had this look on his face. It was like I put life into him. It was a look like he hit the lottery. So I go back to the South Bend Work Release Center, and that evening, right then and there, I asked God to come into my life and wash away all my sins and be my personal Savior. God is opening doors. God is putting me into people's life and changing mine. I've been searching for this. I've been searching for people, good-hearted people that care about me. There's no way I would be in the situation that I am now if I had this 20 years ago. I wouldn't have been locked up. I wouldn't have done 20 years in prison. Now just finally being home with my family is incredible.
Oh, you just don't know. I went 20 years down that highway. Then I always was, talk to people and say, when is my son gonna get out? When? But I love him being home. I love him being home.
Just being able to say, Mom, let's go in the living room and dance. Let's turn the music on. He wasn't doing that. My mom, she was giving up. But now that I'm home, she's up moving around. She's more motivated to do things. Seeing the life that I done gave her since I've been home, it's so awesome. It's wonderful. In the past, I may have taken a life, but now I'm giving life.
Keep us together, whatever.
I thank God for his job because they didn't have to give him a second chance. But because God is about chances, and because God is about chances, they give him a second chance.
I've never in a million years thought I would be working inside of a church. But this is my second family, my second home. First time I walked into the real service was the Christmas Eve lighting of a candle. They lit my candle, and that candle added to that picture of life. Once we find Jesus, we can't keep it to ourselves because God has made positive changes within my life. God's opened doors that no one else have ever opened. I get signs every day from God. Who else would I choose to follow? And why would I keep this to myself? Why not share it?
And because they help you, God gonna help them. Whatever they need and whatever they're lacking, God is gonna allow to see. They're gonna see it. They're gonna see it, and it ain't gonna be down the road. It's gonna be like right now. God is gonna put it in their hand where He's gonna say, "Look, you bless my son, so I'm going to bless you."
I can't help but think about the story in the gospel where after Jesus is resurrected, he's walking on the road to Emmaus with these two disciples. It gives you the impression like he's saying, now I'm going to go a little farther. Do you want to go with me? It just seems like we're at that moment where we're walking with Jesus on the road. We've come to this place where we know there are greater things ahead. And there's this invitation that's kind of scary and maybe a little confusing, and we know it might change everything. Jesus is looking at us and saying, are you tired of merely human effort producing merely human result? I have a dream for this community. Who's in? And it really is an invitation from Jesus, the risen Savior. We're not going to get a better invitation than that.
I had a guy ask me, how big do you want to get? I mean, isn't this enough? And I'm like, enough for what? We got a whole world to reach for Christ. This is a story that includes everyone. Everyone is invited. We may find ourselves running on the road to escape from loss and grief and pain. We may find ourselves running on the road, running towards the life that we long for. But either way, Jesus calls us to this journey and promises He'll be with us. He promises we can trust His Word. He promises His Spirit will guide us. He promises that in the church family we belong. This is a journey we were made for. And I'm in. And there's nowhere else I'd rather be. I am so glad that we get to travel this road together. I'm so glad, so glad.
A new horizon stretches before us, beautiful, promising, full of possibility. This road we're set upon may have risk. It may not be easy, but our road embodies our mission. Taking steps toward Christ together, we will take His message of hope to the unreached, the hurting, and the marginalized. We will follow Jesus, for this is His road. This is our road.